Welcome today to our Leading by Your Values presentation. We are from the Agency Tiered Support Team for the Department of Mental Health, Division of Developmental Disabilities, and myself and Kana Poteet are here today to talk to you about our agency values and how you can implement something like that in your own agency.
Yes, and just some housekeeping things before we get ready. I'm so excited to have you all here with us today. Looks like we have about 45 people already, so we're going to have lots of fun. We have some things to share with you, some little activities as we go through the presentation. So if you have any questions, please feel free to chat them to us. We'll do our best to answer any of your questions or offer maybe a frequently asked questions document at the end of this presentation. And when you do so, can you please make sure that you choose the all panelists options. Sometimes if you just hit one or the other, we won't be able to see all of them. And just to make sure that we all see your questions and you ask them to us, choose the all panelists option. And we are going to be going till about 3:30 today. So if you guys are ready, we are ready to talk to you about values. It's going to be a fun conversation. So my name is Kana Poteet. I am the Agency Tiered Support Consultant Supervisor out of the Kansas City and Albany regional offices. I've been on this team for almost 5 years. It'll be 5 years in May. I'm pretty excited. And this is a really fun conversation to have with people and to really help them understand how your values can impact so much of your organization. So I'll shoot on over to Kathleen and let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Deppler, and I am the Statewide Positive Supports Coordinator. I work closely with the Agency Tiered Support Consultants and focus on the Tier 1 universal strategies. And when I think about universal strategies, I really think about values being the basis of what we're promoting with our staff and the people that we support. So I'm really excited to talk to you about this specifically today because I think it's really the foundation of what we're doing on our team.
So let's talk about some objectives. So I wanted to help you guys understand what organizational values are. We're going to have some conversations about those. Also show you the impact and the product of your values. So not only maybe some products of your personal values, which we're going to talk about first, but also your organizational values. We're going to learn how organizational values can guide your leadership, either personal or as a statewide or an organizational-wide leadership, and how to use actionable steps to enhance your values through the use of some really good systems.
So this is a good opportunity for us to practice this chat box business, which I saw some folks have already been using. So what is a leader? We want to hear from you what a leader means to you. So just chat us in the chat box and we'll shout out some people's answers. Kana, what do you think of when you think about a leader?
Well, I think about somebody who is definitely an advocate. Oh, I love that, leads by example. I would say so as well. I always grew up with the idea of being a leader as somebody who walks the path before others. My dad really had a long conversation with me about that one time, and I've always felt like I was a leader and I wanted to be that leader for others. So I love that leading by example.
I like that origin story of your values too. I think a lot of that comes from the family, and I'm going to share a project I did with my family about our values, so I'm excited for that too. So I like this, someone who's aware of what you need and being able to show those, show them what they need. I like that idea of what that other person needs, not necessarily like what exactly our priority is in the moment, but like what does this person need right now? I like that. Someone who sets expectations and the mission for the agency, someone who models what they expect. I love that. That goes back to that example and like being the promoter of what you want to see and modeling that. I love it. Serving others, promoting success in others. I love that. Service is a personal value of mine, and I'm very connected with that idea. Someone who is aware of what I need and being able to show those skills, that model. Yeah, we really need somebody who can help us. We're going to talk about teaching the values that we expose to as well. Helping people reach their goals, lead by example. honest, inspirational, and positive. We're going to talk about what our personal goals are in a little bit, and you guys are really already working towards some of that. That's great. There's lots of really good things in here, Kana. Motivates the team, takes pride in others' accomplishments. I really like that. Good supervisors really have to learn a different form of appreciating recognition, that recognition of things that the people that you're supporting are doing. That is the kind of leadership recognition you get. Accepts change. That's an example. Love it. Lots of example setting.
Yeah. Well, there are just more and more coming in, and I think that these are all just excellent examples of what it means to be a leader. And Kathleen mentioned that like a lot of these should be instilled in what a good supervisor or administrator could even be. But I also think knowing that if you are a natural leader and you are a person who wants to support your other team members or you want to be a part of that change, you are a leader too. And I felt that when I started working at the Kansas City Regional Office, that I was a leader for my community and I was a person who could really give back in this amazing way. So
that's an awesome observation you made, Kana. Also, like no one mentioned a job role in any of the things that they said. The leader really is about like skills and not about a position that you have. But that's a valuable observation.
Yeah, we all can be leaders in our own way. I like to think that way. So a really good quote that we found that I just find such a strong connection to is, a leader is not an administrator who loves to run others, but someone who carries water for his people so that they can get on with their own jobs. I think that this is such a lovely quote, and it's something that really instilled in me what I wanted to offer to my team and my community and my regional office. And I've always been on the side of, if you want me to do something, then I want to see you do it too. And since that's a personal value of mine, is this equality of work and this equality of understanding, I really wanted to instill that in others, and I wanted to make sure that I modeled and represented that in whatever I was doing. So when it came down to, and I've learned a whole bunch in this 1 year of being a new supervisor. I have learned so much from my team and all of the feedback that they've given me and all of the modeling and encouragement that I've gotten from my leaders and my other non-direct leaders. And one of those things is just, how can I support my team to be the best that they can be? How can I remove barriers for them in order to see them succeed? Is it that I can demonstrate this skill for them to show them that I'm constantly on their side and that I have their back? Is it that I can make something clearer and more accessible to them so they know what's going to come next and what they need to do? So a lot of that is self-reflective of what I do on a daily basis. If something's not going the way that I thought it might, then maybe there's something in the process that I can adjust. Maybe there's something in the expectation I can reassess, or maybe it's how I am supporting and encouraging them to do their own job. So let me carry that water because I want to help you succeed. And I think that it's so interesting when we think about who we are as people and what impact we have in our environment, because if you have learned anything from the things that we talk about, if you've joined any of the other workshops or webinars that the Agency Tiered Support Consultant team or the behavior team have talked about, it's that behavior is a large part of our environment. And that's not just what we learned or what our genetics have told us or what we have done in order to survive to this point, but also our physical environment and the people who are inside of them. So I am a part of this environment. I have an impact on what's going on. My reactions impact the behaviors of others. And if I want to instill in people behaviors that I want to see or behaviors that I find value in, then I need to make sure that my reactions and what I'm putting into the environment is going to be in that vein towards that direction. So yes, Terry, behavior is a part of our environment, and we definitely want to make sure that whatever we put into that environment is going to be positive and motivating and get us where we want to be.
So I think it's really important to think about the behaviors that are occurring in an environment and putting that together with the idea of your personal leadership values. What are the behaviors that you want to see happen in your environment, and how do those things relate back to your personal leadership values? How do they relate back to your agency values? let's take a few minutes and think about your personal leadership values. I want to hear from you in the chat box. And I want you to think about your personal values. So well-being, integrity, respect, communication. I'm just listing Kansas City Regional Office values at this point, actually. I can hear myself doing it. They're drilled into my head. Autonomy. What are your personal leadership values, your personal values? Servant leadership, Helen, I am with you. Service is heavy on my mind. Respect. I love that. Respect for one another. Tiffany.
So as some of these come in, we want to just give you an example of like that core belief and principle that ties to your leadership values. That's really what these are. So what is it that defines you as a person? What are your core beliefs, these driving forces that make you who you are and got you to where you are? So empathy is a strong one for me. Equality, you heard me mention that earlier. Being accountable. I have lots of personal values, and they all tie back to who I am. It's my own vision and mission of Cana Poteet and what I want to be.
Some of the ones that are coming through the chat box are just like really great. Empathetic, encouraging. Laura said growing others, which I think is really cool coming from someone who's an agency coach. That's like a really valuable thing that you could believe in. Respect, hard work. Being personable, so like something about the way that we're interacting with others, consistency, transparency, that tends to be one that a lot of agencies really seek to like embody that value. We're going to be transparent. I like that. Trust, integrity, accountability. These are great. Ooh, a growth mindset. I like it. Communication, motivation, growing together. Lots of really good things here. And there's a lot that people are saying that really coincide with one another too. That's encouraging. Perseverance, willingness to follow. That's a great one. A lot of people talk about leadership, but the willingness to follow others who are leading, I think, that's a huge one, and definitely something we want to get staff on board with. Great. Lots of really good values. Teamwork, that is a big one to me personally. And one of our agency tiered support consultant values, like it, coachable, being teachable throughout life. These are great, and lots of things that we have in common when we look at our values too. It's really great. So when you think about these values, I want you to think about what it looks like to live that value. What are the behaviors that are happening when someone is coachable? They listen, they try, they're resilient in that they'll try again. They're humble. They don't take it difficult. They don't take it hard. Whatever kind of feedback that we've given them, what kind of behaviors go into this? So if you said your value is honesty, type honesty, and then give us a behavior that a person could do to demonstrate their honesty. They tell the truth when it's hard. Honesty, tell the truth when it's hard. What are some examples of behaviors people are doing that live that value? So just pick one of your values and tell us a behavior that a person could do to demonstrate that value.
And Kathleen has a really good example of how she kind of combined these earlier components of identifying your value and then defining this behavior. So she's going to give us a really good example of how she incorporated these into what we would call a matrix. So this is something that you guys can do for yourself, and we'll talk a little bit about it later. But I see some of them are coming in. This is so awesome, you guys. Collaborative, paying attention to others and their self. For positive intent, powerful word.
Oh, I like this, respect. And that, too, Tiffany, means that you talk and include others in the office and think about how your words and actions may impact those around you. Those are all skills that I can use that would demonstrate to Tiffany that I am respectful. I love that. Those are really good. And Kana's exactly right, that our real goal here is to think about what behaviors we want staff to see and how we can relate that back to what behaviors we want staff to engage in and how we can relate that back to our values. And so, like Kana mentioned, one of the things that I did right when the pandemic first happened and I became a person who now has a tiny person around me all of the time, I thought about my values and how I could be demonstrating them. And so what you see here is a small snippet of our matrix. And so you can see here on the left that I have, in the far left, I have 2 values that you can see, and they're tolerance and service. And then across the top, you can see a variety of environments. And so when I think about the environment, is when do I have the opportunity to display this value? I'm at home, I'm in the community. I want to think about what it looks like to maybe do this in a different environment as well. And so then I just looked at skills that I want to see happen in there. So for example, someone said assume positive intent earlier. I see that as tolerance. So assuming positive intent is me demonstrating tolerance. Or when I practice coping skills and composure, that's also practicing tolerance. Now for my little person, when he waits quietly, that's him practicing tolerance. When he tries some new food or activity, that's him practicing tolerance. So I tried to say, what are the things that I want to see and what do I want to happen in my environment? And how can I relate that back to like this bigger thing that I'm really looking for? And when I did this, what happened was that it came to the forefront of my mind, and I began to notice these things happening more often because that's where I was putting my focus. I also noticed that this was a lot to work on, and so it also helped me really prioritize. While I really like to see yoga happening at my house, it's not something that is super high on my priority list when I would rather see some more helping happening. So there's where I'm going to put my focus, right? And just because that's where my focus is doesn't mean those other things aren't important to me. And the fact that I've written them down makes me more aware of them in the environment and able to recognize when they're happening. And I'm stretching now as we talk, this idea of recognizing when it's happening. That's the next part of what's really important. Like once we know that this is something we want to see, how are you going to know when it happens? We have to really be able to pay a lot of attention to that. So all of those values that you said were important to you, taking those and mapping them out with the specific behaviors that a person could engage in to live that value is the goal. And that's then the kind of expectations you can set, things you can teach, model, and motivate.
Yeah. And I like how your the values that you have here have very specific, broken down, observable, measurable, very clear actions that one can take in order to display this value. The clearer we are, the more to do, you've probably heard us say that before, the more to do they are, the easier it's going to be to display and recognize when those values are happening. Okay.
Yeah, I really can't stress enough that helps me really notice things in the environment, just writing it down.
Yeah. Sometimes you have a nice list in front of you and you're like, here are all the things that I need to keep an eye out for. It's very helpful. So we want to kind of show and talk a little bit about in this next section, what are the products of our values? Because we talk a lot about these. A lot of companies have values and they say this is what it means to be this company. But if you've ever heard the video, the talk from Simon Sinek where he says that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Your values are why. Your values are why you do what you do. Your values are why you instill in others this respect, this coaching and growth mindset. Like these are why you do what you do. And here's some of the things that can come out of your values. So it's more than just these big words that inspire us. They get put into action and they make real change.
So if what you're looking for is things being put into action and making real change, one of the best things that we could do is think about our values and then look at our policies and procedures and identify where are our policies and procedures reflecting our values. And if they're not, let's update them and make sure that we're speaking the same language across all of our materials and expectations.
And when we think about these policies, we can really incorporate the idea of, are things clear? Are they positive? Do they specify to do what you need to accomplish terms and ideas? Do you have everything that you need ready to go in order to accomplish all of these expectations that you've set for not only yourself, but for your staff? We look at a lot of policies on a regular basis and evaluate whether or not all of those components are in place. Is that written down? Is it clear? And is there a process and method to track whether or not that thing is being done? And you can tie all of those back into your values. We coach at this agency, and we do so because it goes back to our value of integrity and providing good quality services. So you can really incorporate those together.
And once you've defined your policies and procedures, one of the next steps that you need to take is teaching the skills that you've identified that people need to know and encouraging them to happen. And so some ways that people have already mentioned that we could encourage them to happen is modeling and setting that example. So teaching and encouraging looks like we teach and we coach and we keep providing the kind of support that staff need in order to implement their skills successfully. One of the other things that I think is really helpful about the values, and as you think about teaching and encouraging these skills, when you set up and say, these are the behaviors that I want to see in the environment, here's how I'm going to teach it, I think that something else that kind of happens is you identify some barriers to them being able to implement this. And so like I found that with some of the expectations that I set on my own, that like, well, the environment's not really set up in a way that he's gonna be able to put toys away on his own because I don't have a bin for all of the toys. So how is he supposed to pick this up in a way that makes sense if I don't have everything in the environment ready? And so I think that's another thing that kind of happens out of agencies identifying their values and then looking at their policies and procedures. Well, what do we have available to people to ensure that they're able to meet these expectations and live up to our values? And so you can kind of see some barriers that are going on there, and then you can use this next step of teaching and encouraging to help ensure that people really understand and are provided the support to implement.
Yeah, and like when you're talking about when you're training your new staff and you're trying to help them understand that these are the skills that we're going to be looking for and these are the things that we need to do in order to provide this high level of care, you can really start to incorporate the conversation of your values into that. It's not just that I'm asking you to document because it's important. It's that it ties back to advocating for our individuals and making sure that they are receiving all of the services that we've said that we are going to do. It's documenting to make sure that we are following integrity, that we are making sure that what's happening inside of the home is also going to be represented outside of the home, and that what we can instill in our individuals here, they can take with them long term, because our end goal is to really teach and encourage our individuals. So the more that you do that to your staff, the more that they feel uplifted and the more skills that they get, and the more you tie it back to what it means for them and what it means for the organization, the more you're going to impact the individuals and services. So there's just a lot of really cool things that you can do when you tie your values into your training systems and kitting your staff to do what's expected. And we have a lot of really cool webinars and a lot of really cool workshops that we're going to be launching in the next couple of months. Some of those are going to be about building that good coaching system and building up your training system, and some of them are going to be how do you kind of think about all of the steps when it comes to building your values. So I want to ask you a question. Oh, go ahead, Kathleen.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
So I want to ask you a question. So this is kind of like a poll question. So we just kind of want to know and get the feel for the room. I am interested in knowing what you guys think is the most important part of a training system. So do you think that in-classroom training is most important, one-time follow-up, or ongoing coaching is most important? And you can just type out the answer, or you can put 1, 2, or 3. In-classroom training, one-time follow-up, or ongoing coaching? A slew of 3s are coming through.
That's right. That is right.
Yes.
There's a consensus, and everyone's right.
Yes, ongoing coaching, that is the most important thing that we can do in order to not only see those skills that we spend 40 hours training our new staff on, to see them use long term, but it's also going to be a constant opportunity for you to demonstrate your values, to recognize your values, and to instill the changes and behaviors that you want to see in your staff. Good job, everybody. You passed the test.
Okay, so you have developed your values, you've worked that into a matrix, you've really defined what the specific behaviors are. You have ensured that that's in your policy and procedures. You've ensured that there's teaching materials so that people can be successful. And now you need to make sure that you have a system in place to identify that these skills have happened and be able to provide recognition. So the Kansas City Regional Office is the example that I'm going to use here because that's the example that I experienced the most. And so what we do to recognize when people engage in this behavior, in our value behaviors of well-being, integrity, respect, communication, inclusion, and teamwork, when someone engages in one of those values, I write a well-being card and I say, Kana, you supported me in presenting a webinar, you helped me prepare beforehand, and you were super supportive during, I know that I can really count on you, you're a great team, that's a great example of teamwork, thank you. And I can write her a value card that says this. And so then the agency, what they're getting out of this is an identification of how many staff are being recognized for the values that they're engaged in. We can know what values are being seen the most. We can do some teaching around values that we're not seeing, some specific behaviors that engage in those values. It can really help us direct how we're going to discuss our values and follow the teaching and encouraging of the value behaviors that we're looking for.
Yeah. And a system like this is really what's going to drive that whole conversation home. The more you recognize, the more you have a really structured method of showing people that you value what they do and that they're doing exactly what you're looking for, it's going to provide a more motivated change in your organization. So we have lots of different ways to boost up this system at the regional office. We have on every supervisor's door, we have a really cool matrix that we created and adapted. It's a little bit more visually pleasing, but it's on everybody's front door to their office. We have conversations in our all staff around our agency values. We provide data to the people who help run our team, our A team, and also our leadership team, so we can see what's going on and make really good decisions based off that. So not only are we recognizing staff with this really lovely system that shows them we value them and we care for them, but we also monitor it to make sure that we need to adapt or change anything or maintain what the system is putting out.
And then something that I think is really important about the recognition system is that it's actually a system and it goes back to our values. So it's not just like, oh, I know I'm really reinforcing to my staff. I say, give them attaboys all the time. But the idea that the feedback that you're giving them, it goes back to your agency values and is in relationship to all the things you taught them specifically. That's the really important part that we're trying to get here. It's not just, so the next, Kana's going to ask you a question here in a minute, and I want you to think about that as you answer this question, because when she asks you, how often are you recognizing your staff? We want to know how often you're doing it for your agency values, something specific that you're working on and towards everyone implementing, not a random one, but a specific one in relationship to your agency values.
Nice segue. So again, how often are you currently recognizing your staff through your system of recognition tied to your values? And we could put in once a quarter, a few times a month, maybe daily or weekly. You can even add in there that you don't have a system in place, and that's totally fine. How often are you recognizing your staff around your organizational values?
At least weekly. That's exciting. I would imagine that people at KCRO are getting the Work It card, on the daily. And then we didn't finish telling people about the full recognition system, but anyone who receives the card then gets entered into a drawing, and so there's a monthly opportunity for recognition on a wider scale. So that's something to think about. We have quarterly, try to do it at least weekly, touch base with staff weekly. I like that. Following agency leadership program. Oh, I love that. So there's like a routine habit that's getting built of like, I'm going to give feedback. I think that's really important. Weekly and sometimes daily, a few times a month, a random gift card. Oh, okay. So like, yeah, when you think about how you're going to recognize it, I think there's just like so many different ways. So like the work it card is one example of recognition, and then like the giveaway based on it is another. And then there's a giveaway for people who gave, anyone who gave a card. So like lots of opportunities at different points in there.
I get in that drawing quite a lot. I give a lot of work it cards.
And Garla, I think what you said is really important. If you're not to the point yet where you have your agency values and that's something that you're still working on, then just making sure that what you're recognizing is something specific to that work. That was a really good, something related to the work, Garla. I think that's a good point for agencies that don't necessarily have their own system yet.
So Erica, you're right. Recognition could be a lot of different things. And if you tie it back to what your agency values are, how frequently did you recognize somebody for being respectful? How frequently did you recognize somebody for being an advocate for their individuals, for building that relationship with them? So when we're talking about, those values, that's really what we're tying this all back to, because I can get a good job from Kathleen and be motivated, but when she tells me that I demonstrated a value of the job that I have, of being a team player, of holding myself accountable, of being consistent in what it is that I do, those mean more to me because I know that I am doing the job and being a representation of that job. I am living those life values.
Okay, I love it. I think that there's a lot of really good examples, and people seem quite motivated to be providing recognition to their staff. So it seems like people really understand the importance and the benefit of providing that kind of recognition. So it's awesome. There's some really good suggestions also in the chat box of ways to recognize.
That's what we like, having a good network of people coming together to share their ideas. We're in this together. And that ties really closely to this next idea of communication. This community, this statewide team that we have as providers and staff and components of this entire service system, we can communicate and support one another and try and offer up lots of ideas and be transparent and show what's coming and have a conversation and making sure that everybody knows what's happening. Every person is publicly recognized. Everybody has a moment that's made for them that they know what to expect. So there's lots of really cool ways that we can communicate. And you can think about this. How often are you communicating your values to your people? I know a lot of people have an electronic tracking system like Thera or SetWorks. Are your values on there where people can find them? Do you have a way to track those values? Are you putting them on your website or on your Facebook page? A lot of agencies have Facebook pages. Are you communicating those values at a regular pace so that way people know what they are? And sometimes it's really hard to remember all of these things, but if I know that I can go to the DMH website and see our values plastered right on the front page, then I'm going to be able to refer back to that anytime that I'm maybe forgetting something. So it's nice to have different ways to communicate. Yes, Garla, newsletter or post it in the office. Our regional office is trying to work on building a very large value visualization that you would see right when you walk in on our front stairs. We've been working on it for a while. It takes some time. It's a big initiative, but we want to communicate what we mean to our community and what the community has an impact on us.
Tiffany asked a really good question in the chat box, and I want to talk about it for just a second. So she talked about the idea that sometimes staff feel like everybody gets this. And so I want to talk more about when we're talking about the values recognition, I think one thing that's really nice about the format that we're talking about is it's not really about what you get, it's about what you did. And so when you're providing the recognition, it really needs to become about the specific behaviors that happen and not so much about what someone is getting for doing it. And so I think that could help weigh the balance, because hopefully it's not so much that everybody gets this, but that everybody did this. did this thing, everybody lived this value, and everybody who lived this value is going to be recognized for it. So I think part of that can go back to the way that we're communicating, that we really put the focus on the skill the person engaged in rather than the recognition of here's what you're going to get for having done it. So if we really focus on you did this thing. Another thing to think about is as you're setting up these recognition systems, I mean, the idea is that everybody earns because everyone who works for you is demonstrating these values. So maybe it takes them longer to get there or something like that. But ideally, everybody really does earn because everyone is expected to engage in these behaviors. And I think we can also, just like as we communicate to people, we can really focus on what a person did rather than what a person is getting for doing it.
Excellent. And I have something to add to that when we get to a slide in just 1 minute. I think it's going to kind of encapsulate that conversation too. So when we consider how impactful our values are or how they can be, when we run through our organizations, not only do we grow towards the places that we want, the goals that we have as an organization, the goals that we have as a team, we can really set the stage up for success long term. So when you're thinking about these organizational values and you're starting to recognize that they have so much more value in them when you incorporate them into all of these different systems, into all of these different processes that you have in your organization. You've defined what they are, you've set them up in your policies, you've made sure that you've accounted for all proactive steps, you've started to teach them and encourage them and show them exactly what that looks like, give them examples, tie it back to the organization, you've recognized them for their successes, and you constantly communicate these values. All of those are going to tie towards your overall goals. And to bring it back to Tiffany, change can only be expected by employees when management implements the system first. So if you're finding that people are having a hard time with getting all of this recognition and maybe everybody's getting the same thing, or maybe you're seeing that your data is showing that the system isn't being used as often as it was, the management team or the people who are in those leadership positions should really be demonstrating and modeling at a high rate what that system is or what needs to happen. I am much more motivated to work with somebody who's going to show me that they can do this skill or that they also follow the same expectations that I do. My parents and I had a really respectful relationship because everything that they could do within reason, they also allowed me to do. Whatever I try and instill in my staff, I also show them that I can do that thing too, and that I'm not leaving them behind, or I'm not just sitting in the back and watching them do it. So I really have this strong opinion and value that management should try and do these things that they want to see in others. And that's why I get put into the system of recognizing people at a high rate, because I try and give recognition to my staff through our system on a regular basis, because I want to show them that I believe in the system. I hope that they will too.
Well, and I think that something that Chris said in the chat box, I think is really important about the perception that it's genuine. And I think that people do perceive that it's genuine from you because you're a participatory sort of person, and that's just kind of how you operate. And so I think that one of the things that we also need to think about is a wide variety of different opportunities for people. And some of the things, some of the other things that we should consider are, what are the tools that we have available for our supervisors or coaches so that they're able, you know, for people who it's not their jam to get a work it card or recognition in front of a large group of people, or someone who wants it more one-on-one is able to also get that from their supervisor. And one of the things that as an organization we need are the materials that are going to promote that and make sure that whatever we're providing our supervisors and the coaching that's coming from them is also values-based, so that it's not just this like recognition system where they're getting it, but it's also in their teaching system, it's also in their coaching system. And some of that can really become intrinsic because I am a high implementer and I don't need anybody to tell me that anymore because I see the impact of that all the time, and I feel myself using those skills. True. So I do think that's really important, and it has to be genuine. And I can think of people at organizations who are less inclined to participate in that specific kind of recognition activity. And the people under them are also less inclined to participate in that, I think, because it's not seen as genuine when it happens.
Yeah, being genuine and like true to who you are. That's why if you can find your personal values and you can attach them to your agency values, or even if you can show that I am going to stay true to who I am and to my values, that's also going to help show that genuine nature whenever you're starting to do some of these systems.
And Erica asked a question about the systems and if they're formal, if it's a specific program, or if it's just a practice that our employee has in place. And I want to explain, and Cayman, I know you're going to like do a nice sales pitch for our workshops that are to follow this webinar. But this should be a formal system. This should be part of your agency values. When you have a well-developed agency value system, it has the ability to know what your agency values are, teach those values, recognize when they've happened, and pay off that person engaging in that skill. And so that is a full system that tiered support consultants can help agencies implement across agency-wide. And it does all go back to the culture. Yes, yes, yes.
Yes. And it's really interesting that you bring that up, is like, what is a formalized system? Well, if you remember when we talked about those products, and Kathleen did a good job of kind of tying that back together again, when you talk about those products, those are all components of what make a good system. It's written down in your policy. It's constantly taught and explained. It's recognized and encouraged, and it's communicated on a regular basis. The only thing that maybe isn't always in there is data. How are you going to evaluate your any system that you create, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. And there's going to be lots of opportunities for you to get free on hand-over-hand consultation support from an agency tiered support consultant. So if you're interested in that, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Kathleen. You can also visit our website. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And again, I'm just really excited to share tiered supports with you. So I get a little ahead of myself. What really want to just kind of drive home the point is that you have a vision of your organization. You have a mission. You want to be somewhere. You want to impact your community. You want to provide quality services. You want to have all of these things work very, very well together. But your life values and the behaviors and attitudes tied to those life values are your umbrella for everything that you do. They instill your setting of expectations for the now and the future. They impact your coaching and training through teaching and encouraging and recognizing success. And they are constantly transparent. So if you really want to have something that's going to be the most universal support that you can put in place, your life values and the behaviors that you tie to that are really going to be the thing that you want. Okay, so now we want to talk to you about how you can enhance your agency and even your own personal leadership styles, whether you are a supervisor or you are a team member, how you can enhance your personal leadership and your agency by using agency values. So the first thing that you want to do is identify whether you have these values or not. Some of you, I know, I see you because we work with you on a regular basis. I know that you have some values in play. Think about what are they? Are they big, broad categories? Do they encompass a lot of things? Have you broken those down into specific behaviors? Are they positive? Are they comprehensive? All of those things you can consider whenever you're reviewing your values. And that's definitely if you already have them. Can you, are people using them? Do you might need to rebrand? Otherwise, you can create those values. And we have an entire workshop that we can offer you in the next couple of months that's going to walk you through that process of how do you identify agency values, who needs to be on the conversation, whose voice needs to be heard. We recommend that you talk about everybody in your organization so they all feel participation in this. And then how are you going to break those down and narrow them down to what you want as an organization? And we have some really cool visuals. You've already seen one of them, and Kathleen's going to talk about them again, because not only do you create these values, but you can also visualize these values in a couple of different ways, and that's going to help your communication.
So you guys saw the matrix, and this is really what I used in order to think about it really broadly. I talked earlier about what are my opportunities? Here's all the different environments that we're in, and so here's our opportunities to demonstrate these values. And I think that this is a really important part of the process. Like this matrix, I feel like is very helpful to the process. And you see a couple of blank spaces here, and it's because I didn't feel necessarily like it was a different skill in that environment. And sometimes it could be duplicative. And I also found the same thing to be true when I worked with Kansas City to develop their values. So the next slide is going to show you kind of how we transformed them into a more cohesive or like usable format. So like on the left here, you see well-being integrity. And this is the beginning of that document that Kana showed you is on all the supervisors' doors. And so they took that matrix and they put it into a more digestible and less wordy format. And so here's the 5 or 6 bullet points of the skills that we're looking for people to engage in to reflect that value. And then on the right, you can see an even more streamlined version, and that's what I did for my household. That is much more appropriate for a household probably than the like matrix of bulleted behaviors. It's much more natural, and I've seen agencies also build something like this in their homes because in this house we is a much more natural way to set expectations and talk about those behaviors.
I love these visual representations of our values because I think that it just really helps solidify and constantly give people something to refer back to. So I don't have to look at that matrix and try and figure out, okay, well, when I'm here, I'm here. It just helps you kind of think about that sometimes context and where you are might change what behavior you have in that space, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you stop demonstrating that value. It just might change depending on what's going on. So these values that we at the regional office identified were the most universal and encapsulating that we could think of, but I can also look back on that matrix and see, okay, well, what does this look like in a meeting? And that way I can help model and demonstrate and encourage those behaviors to happen. Yeah, we definitely think visualizing your agency values like this is really, really powerful. And I can think of at least one agency off the top of my head who has all sorts of great visual representations of their values, and they're in lovely signs. They're very decorative. Some of the individuals make their own and put them up on the walls. It's just really, really a lovely way of connecting who you are as an organization and what you want to do for the people and services. So the other cool thing that you can do when you're incorporating your agency values, and this is something that you can do again on a systematic level, when you create a culture of identity and belonging for these employees, they feel really connected and they have overlapped their personal values with your values and they feel a bond there. Especially with the newer generation, we want to have a place to belong. We definitely want to feel like we are connected and valued by the organizations that we give our time to, that we invest in. We want to see that investment back. And if you can start from the very, very beginning to show them that this is who we are, not only are you going to stand out against anybody else, because I want to work for a company who's going to advocate for me, who's going to show integrity and consistency, who's going to listen to me when I have ideas and open to change. I want to work for that place more so than anywhere else. But I can also start looking at how I can find these people in my community. And so I had a conversation with a man once, and he's an agency up in St. Joe. And what he does is that he created these lovely business cards that he gave to all of his staff. And on these business cards, they had the values of their organization on one side, and they had contact information on the other side. And when these staff who were out in the community doing whatever, on shift, off shift, if they saw a community member display the values that they wanted, they would walk up and say, hey, I think that you would really enjoy this job. You should come work for us or give us a call. Like, that's just a cool way of showing, like, I'm investing in you, and I picked you out of all of these people that I think that you would really do well in this position. So that's just kind of a really cool way of onboarding people, but you can do so in other ways, like asking a certain question in your interview process. We have one where we kind of ask people what are their personal values and whether or not they match with our personal values. I want somebody who's empathetic and positive versus somebody who's maybe sarcastic and who really likes to do one thing at a time. On this job, you got to be real flexible. So that would be probably more challenging than if I could find somebody right out of the gate who's going to fit in nicely to the job expectations themselves. So onboarding can be really, really powerful if you use it with your values. And this is one way that you can incorporate your own personal leadership values and start to enhance those as you work with other people. When you coach and mentor and listen to the people that you're working with, you're really going to build this relationship of honesty, of transparency, of vulnerability when you talk with somebody and you coach them and you try and help them be as successful as they can be. It's a beautiful relationship whenever you're coaching and mentoring, and you can do this at any level, staff to staff. I had lots of mentors whenever I was an ATSC. I still have mentors now as an ATSC supervisor. I mentor other people, and they mentor me back because it is a give and take relationship. And what's really cool about this process is that when you connect with your people, you're more likely to see a strong sense of purpose from them, and you can individualize what it is that you're doing. So I know my values, and I want to model those to others, but I also recognize that Sarah has different values, and she brings her own values to the table in addition to our organization. If I can connect the things that she's doing with her personal values, it's going to mean more to her than to just say, very good job when you helped deal with this situation. Instead, I can say, when you supported that provider in that meeting and gave them recommendations that was going to help them improve their internal processes, you really showed great integrity and accountability whenever you were working with them. I can make that even more powerful and show them that not only do I know who you are and what you value, but I also can show you just how much you pull those things into your job on a daily basis. So coaching and mentoring, man, we can have a long conversation about the power of doing that. And we have webinars, we have all sorts of cool things to share with you too.
And one of the points that Chris made in the chat box is really important, that staff evaluations can also be tied to the organizational values. And I think that goes back to the idea of policy and procedure. It is this full system that, like, our values are in relationship to our policy and procedure is how you'll be evaluated. And I think that we should probably consider adding this to that, because that's a really imperative part. Like, it's what they're going to be held accountable to. So we really have to do that. I think that's just awesome. Oh, and when staff are involved in developing, they are more likely to own them, 100%. And actually, I don't know if I'm jumping too soon into our sales pitch for you joining us for our tiered support workshop series. But that's actually what we will do. If your agency already has values, we'll help you go towards those next steps of building the matrix and developing a real recognition system around those values. And if you're not there yet, then what we'll do is help you start at the level of surveying all of the stakeholders involved. So we want to know what staff are saying. We want to know what their values are. We want to know what the guardians, we want to know what the people that you support. We want to know what everyone who is involved in the success of your agency, and to have a voice in those. And what we did at the Kansas City regional office was, at an all-staff meeting when we were all together, we passed out a list of values. Everyone circled their top 10, and then they weeded that down to their top 3. Somebody collected all of that. We identified our top ones. And then we started having some discussions about what are those buzzwords that we're looking for. And that whole process is something that, from the development of your values through to the implementation and maintenance of a recognition system around those values, I would say would probably take an agency about a year. That's about how long that it takes. And our workshop series is set up quarterly over the course of a year to help agencies develop and implement this, and then present that to their peers and share what they have accomplished.
Yeah, and it all ties back to our best practice. If we want to consistently see the quality of life of our people, not only for the individuals, but for our staff, improve in the long term, then really trying to identify all of these steps and build a quality universal system, that's what's going to change our culture, and that's what's going to provide really quality services. So you're right, Kathleen, you're right, Chris. All of these things are so important when we consider what type of value system to put in place, and you won't be alone in this process. You have an agency tiered support consultant. You have your regional office to offer you support and resources. You are always welcome to reach out to us. We love to talk, we love to share our ideas, and we love to help you really create something amazing. So what's next? Well, there's lots of cool things happening across the state. Near the fiscal year, we're going to be offering some really awesome workshops where you can come and work with experts to develop these systems. We have one that's going to be focused on values and communication. So not just how you build those values, but how do you communicate them all the way down to the very bottom, where your pitfalls might be, and how you're going to use data to assess whether or not it's working. And then we also have one about coaching. So how can you be that good coach and mentor? How can you build your policies and procedures up in order to make sure that that system is working? And that is going to be a really cool opportunity. There's going to be some podcasts. There's going to be some good conversations. There's going to be data building. I'm really excited about that. So those are some things that we have coming up next. And then we also, as always, offer as much resources and support that we can to our agencies. So if you need some help in teaching and encouraging, if you need some assistance in coaching, we have virtual coaching workshops. And we're also really interested in making more providers a tiered support agency because we just see the value in it and we know how powerful it can be. So what's next? Well, really it's reaching out to your regional office and getting in contact with an agency tiered support consultant. It could be reaching out to Kathleen or myself and asking us some of these questions that you have buzzing in the back of your head. It could be visiting the DMH website and looking up more about what tiered supports is and all of the different resources that it can offer you. So what's next? Well, it's going to be you reaching out and taking that next step.
I put the tiered support website in the chat box so folks can check out our website. There's a lot of great implementation materials on there. And so I would take a look at the implementation teams to learn more about some of the projects that we focus on and how you might accomplish those within your agency. And there's also an action plan there on the implementation side. And so that kind of outlines some of the steps that we see agencies go through in order to build the systems that we're talking about. Those are both good like overview documents to learn more. And then like Kayna said, please consider joining us for our workshop series. That's next quarter. And if you're interested in joining the values one, then you've already completed your prerequisite by attending today. So thank you.
Yeah. And you'll see my face many, many more times because I will be helping lead those. If you have any other questions, you are welcome to put them in the chat. I believe that you can unmute and ask them right now. And we really appreciate you giving us your time to learn about agency values and just how impactful they can be. As you can see, we get on some soapbox about them. We find them really, really powerful. So please hang around and ask a question. Otherwise, have a great Monday. Enjoy the rest of your March, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody.